This is the story of USAir Flight 5050. On the 20th of September 1989, a 737-400 was on the ground at New York's LaGuardia International Airport. The funny thing is, Flight 5050 shouldn't even be flying today. Today's Flight 5050 is to fill in for Flight 1846 that was canceled. The flight is from LaGuardia to Charlotte Douglas International Airport in North Carolina. The weather at LaGuardia was bad, and the weather had been wreaking havoc on the scheduled flights that day, with flights being delayed several hours. Delays this long were unusual even for LaGuardia. Ground operations were still debating on how Flight 5050 would proceed. At first, the decision was taken not to carry passengers. The plan was to unload the passengers and fly the plane empty to Charlotte for whatever reason. But several minutes later, the dispatcher comes to the captain and says that the flight would indeed be carrying passengers. The captain is apprehensive. He knows that he and his co-pilot are coming up on their duty limits, but the crew decide to go ahead with the flight. As the last of the passengers were boarding, the captain returns to the cockpit from the dispatch center. As they were beginning to depart, the ground crew asks the captain if he wants to open the doors again to let a few passengers in. The captain refuses. At 10:52, the plane departs the gate. They start the engines and pushback is normal. They had about 5 to 7 planes ahead of them on the taxiway. Takeoff would be a while later, but after the endless delays, I assumed they were grateful to be finally on the way. As they taxied, the tower asked them to hold short of taxiway Golf. The captain, for some reason, does not, and the tower briefs them on their new taxiway instructions. As this was happening, the captain was briefing the co-pilot on takeoff, mainly the rotate speeds, the runway that they'd be using. As they taxied, they performed the takeoff checklist. The first officer calls out, "Stabilizer and trim." The captain responded with, "Set," and corrected himself and said, "Stabilizer trim, I forgot the answer, set for takeoff." According to the procedures, set for takeoff was the correct answer that the captain should have given. Finally, at 11:18 p.m., the plane was allowed to hold at the end of the runway, and at 11:20 p.m., the CVR picked up the sounds of the engines spooling up as they hit max power for takeoff. The co-pilot disengages the auto throttles and pushes the throttles up manually. He states that he pushed the toga button, but the throttles did not move. The captain says, "Okay, that's the wrong button pushed. All right, I'll set your power." As the takeoff roll progressed, the crew noticed that the plane was tracking to the left of the center line. 18 seconds after the takeoff roll started, the CVR picked up a loud bang and a loud rumble. At 11:20 p.m., the captain says, "Got the steering." The co-pilot thinks that the captain has just said, "I've got the steering." The co-pilot has the right rudder pedal down hard against the floor. He holds the yoke in anticipation of the V1 and rotate callouts. Seconds later, the captain decides to abort the takeoff. Seconds later, the sound of the throttle levers hitting the idle stops can be heard on the CVR. The FDR backs this up. The plane begins to lose speed. The co-pilot tells the tower about their rejected takeoff. The CVR picks up the sound of the reversers being deployed 9 seconds after the abort was initiated. The plane slows down, but not enough. The plane was getting dangerously close to the end of the runway. The plane does not slow down quickly enough, and the plane goes off the runway and into the Bowery Bay at a speed of 34 knots. 2 people lost their lives. Looking at the flight data recorder from the plane, the investigators realized something interesting. The rudder of the plane was mistrimmed. As we spoke about in the previous episode, trimming a plane means that the pilot set the control surfaces to a preset point so that it's always producing an effect on the airplane. For example, when taking off, pilots trim the plane to nose up, so the elevators are set in a way that the plane tends to nose up on its own. This way, the pilots don't have to apply a whole lot of control input to make the plane do something. In the case of Flight 5050, the rudder of the plane was trimmed to the left. Full trim to the left. That explains why the plane tracked to the left during the takeoff roll. The rudder was properly trimmed when the plane arrived at LaGuardia. But when the FDR came back online while Flight 5050 pushed back, the rudder was set to full trim left. The APU does provide electrical and hydraulic power to move the rudder while the plane was powered down. The investigators were not able to identify how the switch that trimmed the rudder was activated. Maybe someone moving in the cockpit activated it by accident. The knob was near the center pedestal. Maybe something kept on the center pedestal knocked the switch out of its position. We just don't know. But the bigger question is, how did the crew not identify this issue? An entire step on the takeoff checklist is dedicated to checking the trim of the airplane. But he had an opportunity to identify this issue way before they even got to takeoff. The captain should have realized that his left rudder pedal was offset by about 4.5 inches due to the trim. The next mistake that the captain made came during takeoff. As the plane veered to the left, the captain grabbed the nose wheel tiller and tried to steer the plane with it. Pilots use the tiller while taxiing to turn the plane, as the ailerons and other controlled surfaces are useless at such low speeds. According to the manuals, the tiller is only supposed to be used to get the plane lined up on the runway and to taxi. This also explains something else: the bang heard on the CVR. This was the front tires exploding as the captain turned the nose wheel, thereby putting it under immense stress. Once the plane gets up to speed, the tiller cannot provide enough force to make the plane turn. But the captain used the tiller till he rejected the takeoff. As the plane accelerated down the runway, the first officer tried to use some right rudder, but it wasn't enough. Then the CVR picks up the captain saying, "Got the steering." During the inquiry, the captain said that he meant to say, "You got the steering." However, the first officer testified that he thought that the captain had said, "I got the steering," and he expected the captain to control the rudder. Now, both pilots think that the other is in control and the plane rolls on. By the time the captain decided to reject the takeoff, it was already too late. They did not have enough runway to slow down and stop. The decision to reject a takeoff is not to be made lightly. Most rejected takeoffs lead to overruns, so as a rule of thumb, pilots don't reject takeoffs if they're above 100 knots unless an engine fails or something catastrophic happens. The captains had clear signs that something was wrong before they hit 100 knots. First, they had trouble maintaining course during the takeoff, then the loud bang and the subsequent rumble. He should have rejected the takeoff then, but didn't. Ultimately, a mix of bad luck and poor crew coordination sealed the fate of Flight 5050. Had the pilots communicated better, they might have made different decisions. Had they communicated better, they might have caught the error during a checklist, but none of those things happened. Thank you for watching this episode of Mini Air Crash Investigation. A big thank you to Curious PLANESPOTTER for letting me use his amazing videos on my video. If you like the videos that I make, do consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. I'll catch you guys next time.